Okay, good evening, everybody. I am very pleased to welcome you to our Yinspire evening, which, thanks to the marvels of modern technology, we are still able to do despite the situation. And I just think we always give thanks for this, that, and the other at the beginning, and we will give thanks in a minute for the various things. But I think we have to be very thankful that we are able to do this. Last week I was able to go to two women's Megillah readings, to Shirim various, and nothing stops us. We carry on and we increase in our learning, and we increase in our commitment as well, and that which is right and proper at times like this, that we should be increasing in our learning and commitment. And who better to do that with than with Rabbi Johnny Lieberman, who has several times graced us with his presence and his thoughts. And we look forward particularly to this, just thoughts for everybody, for us all really, that we all come through everything okay, and particularly for our soldiers. Some of us have children and grandchildren at the moment. That we should all come through this all safely. And who better to do this with than Rabbi Johnny Lieberman, who's going to be talking about whether Judaism is a one-size-fits-all religion, and nothing is really more keener felt at the moment than the need for achdut, and whether we can have achdut, because we're terribly aware, as things were starting to get back to normal, in inverted commas, that we were all beginning to fight again. So over to you, Rabbi Lieberman, and off you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's nice to be in my own house. I would have said it would be nice to be with you in your shul, and it would have been nice to be with you in your shul, but at least we can be here together on Zoom. Some very familiar faces, some faces that I don't know so well, but it's very nice to have you all, and I hope that we can gain something from this next hour or so. I'd like to dedicate the shiur, as Emma said, I'd like to dedicate this shiur to our amazing soldiers and Air Force who are busy fighting on our behalf. And particularly, I would like to dedicate this shiur to the success and with thanks for the incredible work that the guys operating the air defences, the Iron Dome and the David Sling and the Arrow and the whatever else there is, it's quite remarkable. One of my boys who's in Miluim was guarding at a base earlier this week, and he sent me a little message saying, "You have no idea of the stuff that I have just seen. The technology that is protecting us is just out of this world, and the people that are manning these technologies are also out of this world." And so I give my thanks and yours, and I dedicate everything that we gain from this shiur. I dedicate to their success. Their success is our safety. And we should pray for their success and their safety and our safety in all ways. Okay, that said, really the title of this talk is not quite accurate, and that was brought home to me a few days ago when somebody who I'm very fond of, who attends a lot of my shiurim, said to me, "I hope you're going to be discussing the various strands of Judaism, Reform and Conservative and Reconstructionist and all of those other things in your talk." And I thought to myself, actually, I'm not. And I thought, well, that's not quite right. Maybe I should be. So really, the truth is that the title of this talk should be, "Is Orthodox Judaism a one-size-fits-all religion?" That is what I'm going to be talking about in the main. However, I do want to make some just general comments about non-Orthodox Judaism. And maybe another time in another forum, I will speak about this in greater detail. But for the moment, I want to just put on record that every Jew, whether that Jew is a Reformed Jew, a Reconstructionist Jew, a Humanist Jew, a Haredi Jew, a Chiloni Jew, an atheistic Jew, I don't care what Jew, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. They are all my brothers, they are all my sisters. I may not agree with everything that they believe in. I may not condone everything that they do. I dare say they wouldn't condone everything I do. Even I don't condone everything I do. So, but they are all my brothers, they are all my sisters, and I believe that with every fibre of my being. I have very few regrets in my life, but one of them is this. Many years ago, maybe 30 years ago now, I was invited to speak at Limud. For those of you who don't know what Limud is a supposedly interdenominational Jewish learning experience where all sorts of different things are on offer for people to go and listen to and to learn from. And I was invited to speak in Limud on Jewish medical ethics, which at the time and remains. We've got what have we got here? We have an alert expected. Okay, well, we will continue for the moment. If, however,
Rabbi Lieberman, we've got a warning.
We've also got a warning.
Not a warning. It's not a siren. Okay. It's a
yeah.
warning.
Thank you. Those of you who need the time for the warning to go into your rooms and want to do so now, please do so. Those of you who are in your room flats and can go into the room at shorter notice and want to carry on, because very often these alerts don't always turn out into a siren. We will carry on for the moment. If we get a full siren, then obviously we will all go into our mamadim. But those of you who need to go in now, please do so. We can catch up. You can catch up later with the recording. Okay, so that was great timing. Thank you, Iran, for that. We will give you your recompense in due course. So, as I was saying, I was invited to go to Limud. Limud is an interdenominational learning event where all sorts of things across the spectrum were on offer, except, it seems, Orthodox Judaism, because I was forbidden, for want of a better word, forbidden to go by my rabbi and by various friends of mine in the Manchester Jewish community who said that I must not go to Limud because I would be giving credence and authenticity to non-Orthodox Judaism. And I was only a youngster, and I listened to what I was told, and I didn't go. And it is a great regret that I didn't go, and I wish I had gone. And the reason that I wish I had gone is because of what I said earlier on. These are all my brothers. I want to talk to them. And just on a practical level, if you're not at the party, then, you can't enjoy it. So if I don't come along and say what I've got to say about Orthodox Judaism, then I can't expect people to know about Orthodox Judaism. If I've got something that I want to show the world is great, then I should have the courage of my convictions and do so. The fact that I might not agree with everything that a particular group of people do or say is not the point. The point is they're all our brothers and they're all our sisters. That just to finish this particular point, there is only really one fundamental difference between Orthodox Judaism and non-Orthodox Judaism, and that is the divine origin of the Torah. Orthodox Judaism has a red line which cannot be crossed, and that red line is that the Torah is divine. It was given to Moshe at Har Sinai, and everything else stems from there. Non-Orthodox denominations of Judaism, to varying degrees, believe that the Torah was not either at all divine and was entirely man-made, or was only partially divine and evolved through humankind over the centuries. That's the fundamental difference. All of us remain brothers and sisters. Another one of my sons, when he was applying for a job as a rabbi in an Orthodox synagogue some years ago, the application form, one of the questions was, how would you describe yourself? And you had to circle, and it was Haredi, Chabad, modern Orthodox, Zionist, a few other categories, Litvish, Hasidish. Anyway, he crossed the whole lot out and he put Jewish. And that I was extremely proud of, because that is how we should all be seeing our brothers and sisters. Doesn't matter whether we are part of their gang or they're not part of our gang. They are our brothers and sisters. We can debate the theology with them, and I'm happy to debate theology with anybody. And as I say, at a later date, we will tackle the issues, if you like, between the various different denominations of Judaism, and I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to have, in fact, I tried to get a podcast together between a Reform rabbi and a Haredi rabbi and myself, trying to represent a sort of a spectrum, if you like, with me in the middle somewhere. And the idea was that we would debate various different Jewish topics between the three of us. Thought it was a brilliant idea. And so did somebody else. Leslie was involved a little bit in trying to get this off the ground. And somebody, one of Leslie's guys who was in the business of podcasts and stuff like that, thought it was a great idea. You know what the problem was? The problem was I could not find a Haredi rabbi who would come onto the program. They all said that they would be happy to debate with me, but not with a Reform rabbi. And I thought that was a real sadness, but we'll deal with that at a later date. Right, so let's get to the main topic of tonight then, which is Orthodox Judaism a one-size-fits-all religion? Well, obviously the answer is no, or else I wouldn't have asked the question. So if you're, if you have very severe ADHD and you want the answer to the question straight away and then you can go home, then the answer is no, it is not. But I'm going to demonstrate to you, I hope, why it's not, and why there is a beauty about it not being one size fits all. And we're going to start with a little bit of history. Okay, a little bit of history. I'm going to take you on a 2,000-year journey very quickly in my time machine. And I'm going to start by putting this on the screen for you. Okay, there it is. You can see it on the screen. The top line says, Pharisees, Talmudic sages, Geonim, Rishonim, Achronim, present. That is a timeline. The Pharisees were a group of Jews at the time of the Second Temple. They were the main sect of Jews at the time of the Second Temple. The other main groups were the Sadducees and the Essenes and the Zealots. The Pharisees became the rabbis, or the other way around, I guess. Rabbis are the descendants of the Pharisees. At the end of the Second Temple period, when the Second Temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the head of the Pharisees at the time, said to the Emperor Vespasian, he was allowed to ask for three things. One of the three things he asked for was Ten li Yavne v'chachameha. Give me Yavne and its wise men. And Yavne became the seat of Jewish learning, and that turned into what we now know as Rabbinic Judaism. All the other sects, the Essenes and the Sadducees and the Zealots, all sort of died away, with the exception of the Karaites, who still exist in small areas. But the Rabbinic Judaism, which is what we had basically until the 18th century, 19th century, and the institution of the non-Orthodox denominations was the origins of that was the Pharisees. They became the Talmudic sages. We had the Tanaim who wrote the Mishnah. Then we had the Amoraim who wrote the Gemara. And then we had the Geonim and the Rishonim were the medieval commentators like Rambam. And then the Acharonim, the later commentators. And then, of course, up to the present day. So let's just take a very quick whiz through this. On the screen, you will see here the rabbinic Judaism lasted really from 70 CE, the destruction of the temple, to 600. Here on the screen, you've got the destruction of the temple. Over here, you've got the menorah being carted away by the Romans there. And there's the destruction of the temple. There's the Temple Mount having been destroyed by the Rome. Okay, the Pharisees survive for one reason only, and that is that their Judaism was not dependent on the temple. The Sadducees, who the Hebrew word for that is Sadukim, from the word Tzadok. Tzadok was the Kohen. They were the priestly caste. And of course, once the Bet Mikdash, the temple, had been destroyed, they didn't have a base anymore. Their power base was the temple. Destroy their temple, and they destroyed their power base. The Pharisees survived because their Judaism was portable. What do I mean by portable? Torah study, prayer, halacha. You can move that wherever you want. And they did. They moved it from Jerusalem to Yavne. And then they moved it from Yavne to the Galil. And then they moved it from the Galil to Bavel, to Babylon, and then back again. And then it went into France and Germany and Spain and Northern Europe and Northern Africa. And then eventually it came home back to the land of Israel. But it was portable. Rabbinic Judaism was portable. So the temple is destroyed, and Judaism becomes Torah-centered and not temple-centered, and it becomes Rabbinic Judaism. Within this period, the Mishnah was written down by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Judah the Prince. That was the first codification. And then a few hundred years later, having argued for 300 years about what the Mishnah really meant, we had the Gemara, known as the Talmud. We had the Babylonian Talmud. A little bit before that, we had what is known as the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, which was written in Eretz Yisrael. And this becomes the foundation of all Orthodox Judaism. Then we go into the Geonic period. This is the great centers of learning in Babylon, led by these great academies. You may have heard the names Sura and Pumbedita. These were the great academies of learning in Babylon. And we then move into the Rishonim, the medieval halachic rabbis, Rashi, Rambam, Ramban, all of these people you will have heard of. And then, this is for you, Hannah, wherever you are, we move into the Kabbalistic time. The Kabbalistic movement comes along in the late medieval area. And we get, there's Isaac Luria, that's the shul of the Ari in Sfat. And we get Kabbalah, we get mysticism coming in. And then from then on, we start to get a bit more division going on, because we have a division between the Kabbalists and the rationalists. Shabtai Tzvi came along in the 1600s. The false messiah caused us a lot of problem. And then we're getting a bit more modern now, if you'll pardon the pun. Hasidic movement began in the mid-1700s with the Baal Shem Tov, and that's what we have today. There's a whole bunch of Hasidim at a Tish, at the Rebbe's Tish, and there's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. That's a Hasidism that's very powerful today. In opposition to that, you have the Lithuanian yeshiva world. The key figure there was Reb Chaim Volozhin. He was the founder of the modern yeshiva world. When I say modern, I don't mean modern as in modern. I mean modern as in 1700s. He institutionalized the yeshiva, he institutionalized the method of very analytical Talmud study, very elitist sort of approach. Then we get into the Messiah movement, started by the Israel Seventh. It's concentrates ethics. This is what I call self-modulation Judaism, right? It's really harsh things on yourself, really a hard character refinement. You know, it's the Borstal of Judaism, the Muslim movement. In the mid 1800s, as a response to the Reform movement, we had what is known as Torah im Derech Eretz. That there is my great hero, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, the founder of a movement called Torah im Derech Eretz, the forerunner of what we would today call modern orthodoxy. And there you have modern orthodoxy in all its glory. You can see the modernity in that picture, and these are very orthodox folk. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was a response to Reform Judaism. Then we got a response to that. Everything's a response to everything else. A response to the modern orthodoxy of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was a digging in of the heels of the Eastern European Haredi movement. Agudat Yisrael was founded. An anti-Zionist Haredi ideology forms, and this expands into the early 1900s. And of course, the Haredi world was decimated more than any other world, was decimated during the Holocaust. Religious Zionism came along under Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, who saw Zionism. Rav Kook was a very spiritual man. He saw Zionism as redemption, a beginning. He was the one that popularized the phrase which we use on a very regular basis in our prayers, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, the beginnings of the sproutings of our redemption, referring to the land of Israel and the state of Israel. And then we get into the modern orthodoxy of the 20th century, Rav Soloveitchik, known as the Rav, Torah Umada, Torah and Science, which is really just another iteration of Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch's Torah im Derech Eretz. It's just the more modern version of it. And then after the Holocaust, we have the rebuilding of Hasidism. Hasidism was decimated. 90% of the Hasidic world was wiped out in the Holocaust. And in the 80 years since then, there's been a massive redevelopment of the Haredi world. And in the late 20th and early 21st century, we come back to our modern world now. We have Haredi, we have Chardal, we have open orthodoxy, we have orthodox feminism, partnership, minyan, and these are all orthodox things. They're not reform or conservative. Kabbalah is very much more popular. And what we have here is what I've called the key insight. This is a really important issue. The word Orthodox Judaism did not exist prior to the 19th century. Prior to the 19th century, we were, as my son said on his application form, by the way, he got the job, on his application form, we were all just Jewish. But along came Reform, and those who weren't Reform needed a label to distinguish themselves from Reform. So they chose the label Orthodoxy. Now, the word Orthodox comes from the Greek ortho, meaning straight, as in orthopedics, right? If you've got a wonky bone because you broke it, you want to go to an orthopedic chap to straighten it out for you. Ortho means straight. Dox comes from the same word as doctrine, belief. So orthodox is a straight belief. That's what the word means. So Orthodox Judaism chose that word to distinguish itself from Reform Judaism. Now then, conservative Judaism came along and said, well, hang on a minute. We are not so keen on Reform. That's a bit too radical for us. But we do see that there needs to be some changes going on here. and we're not really Orthodox as Orthodox describes itself. So they had to choose a label for themselves. So they chose conservative. Now, conservative means, generally speaking, conservative with a small c, means that you are less radical. So conservative Judaism meant that it was less radical than Reform Judaism. And there you have your spectrum. But what I've demonstrated to you in the last 10 or 15 minutes is that every strand of Judaism developed as a result, as an action or a reaction to a different strand of Judaism. Newton's second law of motion, I think it's the second, or it might be the third, I can't remember. Okay, everybody, it's ended. That's our sign saying there is no thing. We don't need to go into our whatchamacallits. So that's fine, we'll carry on. Newton's second or third law of motion, somebody will be able to tell me which it is, says to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And that is Judaism. When somebody says, I'm going to be liberal, I'm going to be reform, somebody else will say, I'm going to be even more orthodox than I was before as a reaction to it. When somebody says, I'm going to be really, really strict, somebody will have a reaction and say, I'm going to be really, really lenient. And that's how Judaism has developed. That is how the labels developed, and that's how the whole of Judaism developed. So that was just a little whistle-stop tour of history of how Judaism has developed. Right, now, what I'm going to do now is narrow the whole thing down and show you a different document, which is a chart. If I can find it, hang on a sec, let me just find this little chart. Now, I made this chart up, so I'm hoping that it's accurate. I made it with the help of my friend on ChatGPT. Let me show you this chart that I asked it to make for me. Right, there we go. Now, I've called this chart Halachic Evolution within Orthodox Judaism. So, we've set our parameters. We're dealing with Orthodox Judaism. This is how it started. Right from the beginning, we had the temple. The temple was destroyed and we were left with prayer and study. The oral law was in danger of being lost and forgotten, so it was written down in the Mishnah. Along came the Amoraim in the Talmudic area, in the era of the Gemara, and said, it's not very clear what the Mishnah really meant. So they had a whole bunch of debates, and then you got the Talmud. And then along came Rambam. Rambam was an absolute revolutionary. Those of you who have been with me in the one shiur, I don't know, Gemara shiur, I think, we spoke about Rambam in some detail because Rambam was a very controversial figure when he first started, because what he did was he wrote the first code of Jewish law called Mishnah Torah. He went into the Gemara and he brought out all the halachot and he made a book for simple folk like you and me who can just want to know what to do. We can open the Rambam's Mishnah Torah and he tells us what to do. That was the first legal code. A little bit later, 300 years or so, 400 years later, along came somebody called Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, which you will be very familiar with. The Shulchan Aruch has become the main code of Jewish law, at least for Sephardim. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. Then we started to get the Hasidic influence around about the same time. Then Musa came along, and then we get all sorts of new stuff, technology and medical ethics. I got asked a shaila, a question, a halachic question this very week, which the Rambam would not have known the answer to, could have worked it out, but he didn't know the answer to, and Rabbi Yosef Karo didn't know the answer to, because it didn't exist. One of my friends in shul asked me this week, he's just started to wear hearing aids, and he says, I don't know what to do because they don't last the full 24 hours. I need to charge them up. And certainly they wouldn't last 48 hours when we have 2 days of Yom Tov. And if Nebuch, you live in the diaspora and you've got a 3-day Yom Tov, well, then you've no chance. You won't be able to hear a thing. because your hearing aids will have discharged. What do I do? He says. So we came up with various different ideas, and there is something called the Tzomet Institute in Alon Shvut, which is an institute of top scientists who are using modern technology to solve halachic conundra. And that is where we're up to here, technology and medical ethics. So the halacha is developing all the time. Now, let me take that off the screen for the moment and find something different for you to look at. Give me 1 second. Right, now, what does this chart of halacha demonstrate to us? Let's have a look. Let me put this bit on the screen for you now. So this chart that I just showed you shows that the starting point is that Orthodox Judaism maintains, now this is really important, maintains that the authority of the Torah does not change. What does change is the application, the emphasis, what is the decision in the hearing aid? I'll tell you in a minute. Good question. The application, the structure, the emphasis, the codification, and the methodology absolutely do evolve. Okay, I'll just stop there, tell you the answer to the hearing aid is you can put your hearing aid on a time switch. You plug it in with one of those plug-in time switches and you have it to come on. It probably takes 2 or 3 hours to fully charge your hearing aid. So you put it on 2 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the morning. Before you go to bed, you put your hearing aid in, it's off because the time switch has not yet switched it on. While you're schloffing at 2 o'clock in the morning, time switch comes on, charges up the hearing aid. At 5 o'clock, it switches itself off. And therefore, when you wake up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever, 7 o'clock, whatever time you wake up, and you take it out of the hearing aid charger, you've done nothing because it's switched off. And you've got a fully charged hearing aid and you put it in, and you can do that every single night between 2 and 5. You just leave it plugged in. So that is called a grammar. You're causing it. It's a causation. It's not a direct use of electricity on Shabbat. And not according to everyone, of course, but according to many of the poskim, Hannah doesn't like it, but Rav Rakefet likes it. Rav Greensfeld likes it. Who else likes it? Various other people that I went through and found it. So that is certainly an acceptable methodology accepted by many modern Orthodox rabbis. If you want to find rabbis who don't accept it, well, you can certainly find them as well. And therein lies the point. Okay, therein lies the point. So let's just have a look at our document on the page at the moment. So to go back to our story, temples destroyed, radical change. No more temporal sacrifice. We have to do something instead, right? What do we do instead of temple sacrifice? We go to shul and we daven, prayer. That's radical. You may not think so, but put yourself in the mindset of a Jew in 70 CE, in the early part of 70 CE, right? Prior to Tisha B'Av, 70 CE, you were bringing temple sacrifices. And suddenly, on Tisha B'Av, there's no more temple. So somebody has to do something about it. So the whole thing evolved. And temple sacrifices is no more. And the rabbis changed it into Torah study and mainly prayer. Prayer takes the place of sacrifice. Why do we have a tefillah, an extra tefillah on Shabbat and Yom Tov called Musaf? What is Musaf? Additional. The word Musaf means additional. Why do we have an additional prayer on Shabbat and Yom Tov? Because in the temple, there was an additional sacrifice. So each of the prayers that we have are a direct replacement for the sacrifices. Where in the Torah does it say that you have to daven? It doesn't. Don't bother looking for it because you won't find it. It's a brand new iteration made up by the rabbis in Yavne and beyond, that the prayer would replace the sacrifices because it had to. What's the expression? Necessity is the mother of invention. Is that the correct expression? I think it is. Necessity is the mother of invention. And that was what happened. It was necessary. We didn't like it. We wanted a temple. We've got no more temple. We can't bring sacrifices. So what are we going to do? Nothing? Sit there wringing our hands saying, Oy vey's mir? No. The rabbi said, okay, we've got to change things up. What a radical change that was. That was probably more reform than anything else that we've seen in centuries, in millennia. Okay, right. Now then, next thing that came along, 130 years later, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is sat there, by this time not in Yavne, but in the Galil, and he's thinking to himself, I've got a bit of a problem here, because there is a halacha that says the oral law is not allowed to be written down. It's meant to be oral. Now, why is it meant to be oral? What's bad about writing it down? It's meant to be oral because when it remains oral and it's talked about and it's passed down from generation to generation, it can evolve. It can be adapted. The different generations who receive the halacha from the previous generation can adapt it within that Torah authority. Remember, this is our absolute red line in Orthodoxy. The authority of the Torah doesn't change, only the application, structure, emphasis, codification, and methodology change. So that's why it was oral, and it's not meant to be written down. There is a halacha, you don't write down the oral law. But Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did write it down. He wrote it down and it became the Mishnah. Why was he not excommunicated for doing such a terrible thing? Well, he had a choice. I think in English we call it Hobson's choice. Either the oral law would get forgotten altogether, or it would have to be written down in order to be preserved, but in so doing, it will lose an element of what it's meant to have, which is its dynamism. And unfortunately, that is what happened. It was obviously the right choice because Rabbi Yehuda Nasi knew that if he didn't write it down, the whole thing would get forgotten and who knows where we would have ended up. So he wrote it down and he did the best he could do. But we know from learning Gemara that what he wrote down was open to, and here comes our key word for tonight, was open to interpretation. And what you have in the Gemara are pages and pages and pages of dispute between Orthodox rabbis, well, also the lesser term, the word Orthodox didn't exist, but we don't have them. Interpret it in different ways. So that was radical. Again, you have, and I've written here, the Mishnah is itself a dramatic shift from a fluid transmission to textual canonization. What do we say about something when we want it not to be completely fixed? We say it's not written in stone. What do we mean by that? We mean it's not the Torah, which was written in stone on the Aseret Dibrot. It's not written in stone. Because the oral law was not meant to be written in stone. Okay, we then come along into the next dramatic shift with the Rambam, the Maimonides, and he systemized Jewish law. He wrote it in his Mishnah Torah, he's codified it so that it was very easy for people to look at. This developed into the Shulchan Aruch, and at the time of the Shulchan Aruch, we started to get an element of uniformity, right? You may have heard the expression, I'm a Shulchan Aruch Jew, meaning that I keep everything in the Shulchan Aruch. I would be as bold as to say to you, I'm looking around here and say if I can say this about certainly most of you, maybe not all of you, because I can't see all the names all at once. We've got 50 people on, 50 computers at least. Most of us here are not Shulchan Aruch Jews. Shock, horror. Why not? Well, I'll tell you why not. Because along came somebody called Reb Moshe Isserlis, who lived in Poland, in Eastern Europe, and on many points disagreed with the Shulchan Aruch. And he wrote something called the Ramah, which is him. He wrote a gloss to the Shulchan Aruch. Generally speaking, the Sephardim follow the Shulchan Aruch, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo. Generally speaking, the Ashkenazim, of which most of us are, follow the Ramah. So we are not, most of us, Shulchan Aruch Jews. Most of us are Ashkenazi, following a different codification. Which brings us to, let's take that off now, which brings us to the idea of different interpretations by Ashkenazim and Sephardim. Okay, I don't know about you people, but in my previous life in the diaspora, even though I certainly knew many Sephardim, and in fact some of my family married into Sephardim, however, I was not very familiar with many of their customs. I was familiar with some of their customs, and I probably was more familiar than most because, as I say, some of my family married into Sephardi families, and so I was aware of some Sephardi minhagim, some of which I've adopted myself. However, many Sephardi minhagim I'd never even heard of until I came here. Just as a matter of interest, show of hands on the screen, please. Who, before you came to live in Israel, had heard of the Mamuneh ceremony, which takes place Motzei Pesach? Who had heard of it before you came to live in Israel? I hadn't. Hands up if you hadn't. Right? Most of us. I'd never even heard of it, didn't know what it was. Okay? Never even heard of it. Of course, we know what it is now. It's a Moroccan ceremony. I'll give you another example. Many of you know that I have been a mohel for 35 years. I thought I knew pretty much everything there was to know about Brit Milah. A few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, somebody invited me to a Brit Yitzchak. Anybody know what a Brit Yitzchak is? No? Yes? Nadia knows what it is. Unmute yourself, Nadia, and tell us what it is.
On the night before the Brit, they all gather around the baby and read all sorts of things. I'm not quite sure what, but it's very important to them.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. Thank you for that. A Brit Yitzchak, and I didn't know about this. A Brit Yitzchak takes place the night before a Brit, and they gather around the baby. They say all sorts of stuff, as you say, Kabbalistic stuff, and Torah readings, and all sorts of things. Now, if you, I was amazed when I found out about this, and I was amazed, not that it was so amazing, I was amazed that I didn't know anything about it. And so I went onto a WhatsApp group that I'm sure you're all members of billions of WhatsApp groups. Well, I'm a member of billions, and one of them is a WhatsApp group of Moalim in the UK and beyond. There's about 100 of us on this group, and every now and again we discuss all sorts of stuff that you don't need to know about. But anyway, I posted on this group a question. How many of, we'll come to that SD in a sec. How many of you who are not Sephardim on this group know what a Brit Yitzchak was? And very, very few of them knew what it was. Now, if I were to have said to my Sephardi colleagues who were Moelim, what's a Wachnacht? They would have said, what? What on earth are you talking about? Well, of course, the Wachnacht is the equivalent in Ashkenaz. The Wachnacht means literally means a sort of waking night. You stay awake all night, the night of the bris, and you learn all night. The similar sort of thing to the Brit Yitzchak. Not as much fun as far as I can gather, but that's the difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, generally speaking, I guess. But the point being that we have
Johnny Wach means guarding.
Guarding, thank you. Yeah, guarding all night. Thank you. Yeah, Wachnacht. You're guarding the baby. You're guarding the baby from any harm that should come to. Thank you, Philip. Guarding the baby from any harm that should come to him overnight before the night of the bris. This is an example of how Sephardi minhagim and Ashkenazi minhagim diverse and are diverse, and they become very different. Now, there's a great Israeli comedian called Modi. I'm sure you've heard him, and he has some great little lines where he talks about the difference between Ashkenazim and Sephardim, and they're great fun. And he makes fun of the Sephardim, and he makes more fun of the Ashkenazim because they're easier to make fun of, I guess. And it's very amusing. But the point is, the serious point is that the serious point is that there are different minhagim. Hannah is asking a question: how is a Brit Yitzchak different from a Shalom Zachor? A Shalom Zachor takes place on the first Friday night of the baby's life. The Brit Yitzchak takes place on the night before the Brit, whether it's a Friday night or a Monday night or a Tuesday night, makes no difference. The Sephardim, by the way, don't know what a Shalom Zachor is either. They don't do Shalom Zachor. Okay, so you can see there are different minhagim here. Now, clearly, we've answered our question: is Judaism one size fits all? No, it isn't. Now, the problem comes when, let's take this one off now. I think, are we sharing at the moment? No, we're not sharing. I want to share a different document with you now, please. I'm going to show you a few halachic sources now. Where are we? Share, one sec. There we go. So we can see that the minhagim change with various different places, right? Even within small areas, you have different minhagim, okay? And you have different interpretations of the halacha. Those of you who are English on this screen, as opposed to American or even Scottish, will be very familiar with the concept of the English Mars bar, right? The English Mars bar, which Vivian knows exactly what I'm going to say because she's smiling. The English Mars bar it begins its journey in London as kosher and ends up 200 miles north up the M1 and the M6 in Manchester, and it is no longer kosher. It is not given sanction by the Manchester Beth Din. And the question is always asked: at what point in the journey does the Mars bar become treif? It's a joke, everybody. What it really means is there is a difference of interpretation in halacha. And that is absolutely fine. And that's how it should be. The halacha evolves, right? And we're going to show a few examples on this piece of paper in a minute. But just before we get to the piece of paper, one of the things that is important to say, and this is something that it took me until I came to live in Israel when I was around 53 years old, to fully understand. Growing up in Manchester, which was a great place to grow up in, it was I had a wonderful Jewish life, a wonderful Jewish childhood and adulthood. I have no complaints about my Jewish life in Manchester. However, what I didn't realize was that what was presented to us in Manchester as being mainstream halacha, and really as being one size fits all. In other words, this is the way you do it, this is the halacha, and there is no room for any discussion. That was presented to us as mainstream halacha. What I now realize, with the benefit of a much greater knowledge base, a much greater people base, if you like, having met all sorts of different people from all sorts of different lives, not just Manchester Jews or not just even English Jews. What I realized is that what I was presented as mainstream halacha was one version of it. And it happened to be a particularly strict version of it. That just was the way it was. Manchester's interpretation of the halacha is much more strict than most, example being the Mars bar that I just told you about. But I didn't know that. I thought this is the halacha and there is no real room for interpretation. Of course, that's not true because there is much room for interpretation. For example, the question of the hearing aid. I have given you names of modern Orthodox rabbis with very, very good pedigree, thank you very much, who permit the use of a time switch for a hearing aid. I can give you the names of other rabbis with great pedigree who will say it is not to be used, not allowed. And so there you have interpretation of the halacha. Now, as a proof to what I'm saying, I want you to look at the screen over here, the source sheet. The very first Mishnah, we've all learnt this in school, in Cheder. Any of you who went to Cheder will have learnt the first Mishnah in Brachot. When is the right time to say Shema in the evening? Okay. The first thing we find is a machloket, an argument. Misha kohanim nichnasim le'achol b'trumatan ad sof hashmoah harishona divrei Rabbi Eliezer. From the time the priests enter in to eat their truma, that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Chachamim omrim. The rest of the sages say, nah, you got it wrong, mate. Ad chatzot. It's until midnight. Rabban Gamliel's got a third opinion, and he says until dawn. Right? There you go. A single halacha. How simple can it be? How difficult can it be? When is the right time to say Shema? The very first Mishnah. And you've got three lots of rabbis that can't agree the answer. And who's right? Well, no matter who's right. That's not the point of this discussion. The point of the discussion is that these are all, as my rabbi in Manchester used to say, these are all Jewish gentlemen, right? They've all got good pedigrees, right? They're entitled to have an opinion, which is a solid opinion. And each one of them comes along and gives you a proof as to why they are right and the person they are disagreeing with is wrong, okay? So we live in a society. That's source number one. Let's go on to source number two. We live in a society which is, we had this discussion in one of our shiurim recently. We live in a society where the attention span of people is getting less and less and less. We live in an ADHD society. We can't concentrate very well. And so therefore, what we all want is the bottom line. Okay, and this is not new. It's not new. We had the Gemara. The Gemara was where all the halachot are, but you've got to search them out. They're not all there neatly categorized for you. You want to know what to do on Shabbat, you've got to learn the whole of Gemara, right? Well, people couldn't do that. So the Rambam came along and made a code. And the Shulchan Aruch came along and made a shorter code. And then came along Rav Ganzfried in the 19th century. And by that time, we had even less concentration. And he made something that we will have learnt. And Johnny learnt this in yeshiva. What was it, Johnny? Kitzur. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. What does the word kitzur mean? Short. The shortened version of the Kitzur Shulchan, of the Shulchan Aruch. And now what we all need to do, what we all want to do, is we just want the bottom line. So you go in and you ask AI, what's the bottom line? It's like the maths teachers. We got any maths teachers with us today? Maths teachers. You don't give any marks or only give half the marks if you get the right answer without showing your workings, right? You've got to show your workings. You've got to know how to work it out from first principles. So This is why we preserve the minority opinions. It would be very easy to do away with the Gemara, do away with the Shulchan Aruch, and just keep the Kitzur, just keep the shortened version. What do we need all the other stuff for? Well, we need the other stuff because we need to be able to work it out from first principles. Because when a new thing comes along, like electricity, for example, we can't go to the Shulchan Aruch and say, well, hang on a minute, what does it say? We can't go to the Kitzur and say, what does it say about electricity? Because it didn't have electricity. So we need to know how to work it out. So it's very important that we preserve the minority opinions. And that's why here there's a Mishnah there in Ediot, in English, why the opinions of the individuals recorded alongside those of the majority, even though we don't follow them as the law, so that if someone else later says, well, that's what I learned, they can be told, yes, that's correct. There is an opinion like that. And in certain circumstances, we can rely on that opinion. It's called in Halacha, Yesh al mi lismoch. There is somebody upon whom you can rely. Very important. Now, let's go on. Very, very famous Gemara now in the Gemara in Eruvin, famous Gemara. I'll read it in English. For 3 years, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disagreed about a certain thing, right? Didn't matter what it was. And these saying the law follows us, and those saying the law follows us. Beit Hillel says it's like us. Beit Shammai says it's like us. And a voice came out from heaven and said a very famous thing. You may have heard this in Hebrew. Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and these are the words of the living God. In other words, they're both right. How can they both be right? You've got two mutually exclusive opinions. That Hillel says that Shammai says no, that's wrong. It was right. It says that's right. That means that you both got some reason for saying so. And in certain circumstances, it may be that we go by Beit Shammai, and certain circumstances by Beit Hillel. There is nuance, there's interpretation, and this is going on at Mishnah level and at Gemara level. Eventually, we paskin mostly like Beit Hillel. Why? Source number 4, because they were pleasant, humble people, and they taught their own, both their own views and their opponents' views. Beit Shammai was a little bit more haughty, dismissive of others, whereas Beit Hillel was inclusive. And we go like Beit Hillel mainly to show that other people's opinions that we may not be hold by are not to be completely dismissed. And that is the difference between my previous life in Manchester, not understanding, my fault, nobody else's fault, my fault, not understanding the nuance of interpretation of Halacha, to now where this is much more open to interpretation and to find it. Okay, let's move on to source number 5, legitimate halachic diversity. Let's take our favorite topic coming up in the next few weeks, kitniot. Kitniot, right? I know people who are Mechalel Shabbos, don't keep kashrus, don't go to shul on Yom Kippur. Don't know if they fast or not, I couldn't say. But God forbid they should eat kitniot on Pesach. Right? God forbid they should eat kitniot on Pesach. You wouldn't credit it. Except that it's become an incredibly important thing for certain Jews. Which Jews? Ashkenazim, generally speaking. Sfardim, not all of them, but most Sfardim do not hold by kitniot because they never took on that thing. It wasn't a minhag of theirs. We can do the kitniot lecture another day if you want, in another forum, why and what and have you. The point here is that look what the Ramah, remember I mentioned the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, the gloss on the Shulchan Aruch that most of the Ashkenazim hold by, look what he says about kitniot. Here, I'll say it in English. I'll say it in Hebrew first. The nahagu, and it was customary, b'miktzat makomot. Ktzat, you know what ktzat is? A little. In a few places. It was customary in a few places, shelo la'achol kitniot b'Pesach, not to eat kitniot in Pesach. So the Ramah, the king, if you like, of Ashkenazi halacha, says it's only a few places where they don't eat kitniot, right? And us, mushagoyim that we are, go off the wall in case we might eat a derivative of a derivative of a derivative of kitniot. Okay, the halacha has developed in that particular example. It's developed, in my humble opinion, in a ridiculous way. It's gone on steroids and metastasized into something stupid. But it's developed. The Sfardim, sensible folks, said, "Well, I'm not taking that on board. I want my rice and my beans and my peas and all that stuff. It's not chometz. Why should I not eat it?" Okay, next. We're running out of time a bit, so I'm going to go a bit quicker now. Have a look at this absolute. This is controversial now, by the way, what I'm going to say. I put a rider on that I 100% firmly believe what I'm about to say, but it would be considered to be heretical by some people. And if you are offended by my opinion on this, then, well, I don't apologize, but I just tell you, you don't have to believe it because it's my opinion, and there are other opinions, as I've been telling you. However, this is my view. We read in the Torah, we read it in Parashat Mishpatim, we will read it again in Parashat Ki Teitzei. Ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye. The Torah says, if you poke out somebody's eye, ayin tachat ayin, you have to lose an eye for an eye. It goes on to say that which you did to somebody else shall be done to you. To me, it is absolutely clear as crystal that what the Torah meant when it said that was literally that an eye was removed for an eye. The Gemara tells us in Bava Kama that by the time the Gemara was written in 450, this had been reinterpreted. Ayin tachat ayin mamon. Ayin tachat ayin does not mean that you poke somebody else's eye out. It means that you pay them monetary compensation for the value of the eye. Genius! Genius interpretation. Do I think that's what was meant originally by the Torah? No, I don't. Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu write something in order to confuse us? If he meant give money, he would have said give money, right? This is too, for me, this is the heresy. I am saying that I do not believe that Moshe Rabbeinu was told at Har Sinai, ayin tachat ayin means mammon. That's heresy, okay? If it's heresy, I apologize, but that's my view. I think that is interpretation by the Gemara, because by the time it came to the Gemara, it wasn't a done thing to go poking people's eyes out. Whereas if you look in the Hammurabi Code, it certainly was back at the time when the Torah was given. Okay, here's another one. Not quite as heretical, but nevertheless very, very interpretive. We have many, many things in the Torah for which you have got the death penalty, correct? Right? What do you get the death penalty for? Striking your father, striking your mother, being mechalel Shabbos, all sorts of things, right? Rape, homosexuality. Adultery. Yeah, thank you, Philip, for that. All of those things, right? The death sentence. We have this very famous Gemara in Makot, which says, you all know this, Sanhedrin, Hahoreget nefesh achat b'shivim shana nikreit chavlanit. A Sanhedrin that executed one person in 70 years was considered destructive, and another opinion said it was considered cruel. In other words, there is the death penalty in the Torah, but the way the rabbis interpreted it was never carried out, or almost never carried out. interpretation of the halacha changes with the generations. Okay, radical adaptation, and I've called this in number 10, radical adaptations for survival. Because if we didn't write down the oral law, it wouldn't have survived. Let's just finish off with this, number 11 here, my favorite, women's Torah education. Those of you who know me will know that I am a massive fan and facilitator of women's learning of Torah. I love it when women learn Torah. I love it most when women learn Torah together with men, which is why I love doing the shiurim that I do with my chevra, because we have men and women. Women want to learn on their own, that's also fine. Men want to learn on their own, that's also fine. However, learning together is the ideal as far as I'm concerned. But women learning in general is a very modern thing, right? Let me tell you a little story. I was once stood at the side of a cricket pitch in London. It was actually the final trial for the Maccabea Games for the GB cricket team. And my lad was the only Mancunian there. The rest of them were Londoners. So I was there, didn't know a soul. I'd taken him down for this trial. We were stood on the side, all the parents. I didn't know anybody else. I start chatting with this fellow, and he starts talking to me. And he tells me this story, this fellow. He tells me this story that his wife had started to go to, I don't know how this discussion came up, but his wife had started to go to a Gemara shiur in his community. And they were learning, let's say, Gemara Brachot, let's say. So his wife asked him to go and buy for her a Gemara in the local bookstore in Golders Green. So he goes into the bookstore in Golders Green and he says to the chap there, can I have a Gemara Brachos, please? And he says, well, what kind of one do you want? He said, well, I don't really know. It's for my wife. She's learning Gemara. He wouldn't sell it to her. He refused. He said, no, I'm not selling you a Gemara for your wife. Women are not allowed to learn Gemara. Now, that was, I know exactly when it was. It was 2005. It was 2005. 20 years ago. That's all. 20 years ago in Golders Green, there's a bookseller, and there may even still be there today. There was a bookseller that wouldn't sell a Gemara if a woman was going to learn it. That's outrageous. Why were women not allowed to learn back in the day? They weren't meant to learn back in the day because it was thought that women were not educated enough. They weren't able to grasp these things. And that's what men thought back in the day. We're talking in the Middle Ages. Fast forward to our day, women know as much, if not more, than men. They are at every single level of authority in the world, except for rabbis. Right? You can be president of the United States if you want to, if you're a woman. You can be president of the Supreme Court in any country that's not got Sharia law, at least. But according to certain interpretations, you can't learn a piece of Gemara. It's interpretation which needs to change with society. And it's not heresy to say so. That is called evolution. Rambam was a controversial thinker who started this whole thing off. And we'll just finish with this on the screen here. Kohelet, our favorite posuk in Kohelet, Ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh. There is nothing new under the sun. Everything that we have in Halacha, somehow or other, goes back to that very, very first thing that I showed you. The authority of the Torah is absolute in Orthodox Judaism. That's why this title had to be Orthodox Judaism. It's not one size fits all. We accept, Orthodox Jews accept the authority of the Torah. However, anybody that says the halacha cannot change, anybody who says that the halacha cannot dynamize, anybody who says that the halacha cannot evolve is clearly putting his head in the sand and is denying history. Because from the very, very start, halacha evolved, dynamized, and changed with the concept that the Torah's authority is absolute. Now, you can't just go and do whatever you want. You can't just listen to any old so-and-so. You've got to have some kind of backup, which is why when my friend asked me about the hearing aid, I actually came up with that solution myself. Thought it was rather clever, but I wasn't willing to take that responsibility on myself. Who am I? I'm just an average Joe, right? So I went to somebody who's more senior than me, knows more than I do, has got more backing in halacha than I have. And I said, this is what I think. What do you think? One of them said, no, don't like that. Somebody else said, yeah, that's exactly what I do. I've got hearing aids and that's what I do, this rabbi said. That was Rabbi Rakefet, if you want to know. Okay, so the takeaway message from this shiur is that we Orthodox Jews believe in the divinity of the Torah. We believe in the absolute authority of the Torah. But God has given us the job of interpreting that halacha and interpreting it in a way that fits our society. That's not to say we reject any of the Torah's authority or reject any of previous rabbis' authority. What it means is that there are new circumstances which require new nuance, new consideration, new evolution, new dynamism, and we go back to the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Asei lecha Rav. You find for yourself a rabbi whose views you can align with, whose knowledge you respect, whose interpretation of the halacha you respect, and who you know will regard the Torah's authority as absolute, and you stick with that rabbi. That's what Asei lecha Rav means. It doesn't mean that there's one Rav for everybody. There is not. Everybody here will have a different interpretation of all sorts of things. Your rabbi will not be my rabbi, and my rabbi will not be your rabbi necessarily. So the message here is the Torah's authority is absolute, but halacha has, does, and will evolve, and long may that continue. I think that's enough from me, and I'm going to open it up to questions. But before I open it up, there's 9 things on the chat. Let me just have a look and see if there's anything that we can do. Can you please zoom in on the page? Sorry, only just seen that now. Ashkenazi call it Shema Yisrael. That's the Vachnacht that we talk about. Brit Yitzchak Shalom Zacha, we answered that. Zoom in. If you're on your phone, can you? Okay, everyone can expand their own. Okay, right. I think the chat's done. Right. Questions, please. Who has got a question? Anyone?
I don't have a question, but I've got a comment if you want.
Okay, all right. In the absence of a question, we'll have a comment. Go on then, Hannah.
First of all, I apologise that I missed bits of your talk, because I was busy here. But halacha, I was once told, is the same word as holech, and it's called halacha because it's meant to evolve. It walks with you, with the Jewish people, as we go along. I don't know if you mentioned it.
I didn't, but that certainly fits in with the overall thesis. Thank you. That's a very interesting point. Halacha comes from the verb lalechet, to go. Going by definition is not static. Thank you, Hannah, for that.
Johnny, can I make a comment, please?
Yes, Harvey. Please go ahead.
You mentioned the problem we all have about kitniot. I think it's incumbent upon you, I know you've got a busy schedule, to do to give us a talk on the kitniot, because I really, in all logic, cannot do without. I cannot believe in kitniot. But Ashkenazi, I have to. If I can find a way out.
Okay. Let me answer that question. You will be pleased to know, Harvey, and anybody else who might also be pleased to know, that I have a recording of a shiur that I did a few years ago, exactly on this topic of kitniot, with a handout explaining exactly what kitniot is and isn't, and the what is a mishugas and what is not a mishugas. And I will send that link. I'll send the link to that shiur, and you can listen to it at your leisure. Together with the handouts, I'll send that. Emma, I'll send it to you, and you can send it out to the Education in Netanya group and anybody else you want to. And you can listen to it at your leisure. I'll send the handouts as well. And if after you've listened to that shiur you have further questions, then please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to discuss it. Okay, Jackie, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a bad boy, but anyway, I follow on what you're saying about an eye for an eye, which gets interpreted, so we get a different reason, right? Pardon? Hello? Hello?
Here's the one.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, Jackie. Go ahead.
We get the eye for the eye. We've interpreted it to something different. We're now getting ladies who are learning to be rabbis. Could it ever be interpreted that they become leaders of communities?
I think that the answer to that question is yes. If you look back not that far in England, certainly in my living memory, women were not even allowed to be on the shul council. Yeah, Hazel's nodding her head. She was probably on the shul council fairly early on, I'm guessing. And then they were allowed to be on the council, but they weren't allowed to be the chairman. And then they were allowed to be the chairman. We have now today women who have been given qualifications as halachic decisors, people who they are able to give halachic opinions in various different things. And there are some communities who have begun to put their little toe in the water to have women as, if not with the title of rabbah, then effectively a rabbah, a teacher and a leader. So yes, I think it will come within the Orthodox world, Jackie, and I think it will not be far away. Rabbi Brian, I think you have got something to say.
May I have one after him, please?
Okay.
Yes, after Brian is Hazel.
Excellent share. I mean, of course, we all understand how halacha does vary with age, does vary with the time. And coming from both Glasgow and Manchester, one realizes that the strict humrot that we had to go through in Manchester don't apply to the rest of the world. One of my comments was that you say that it's a one-stop shop. I think in Israel, the education of our grandchildren, children and grandchildren is coming towards a common aim. In other words, the nusach that they're taught in schools and the way they're taught is more like a common nusach. The nusach, I call it nusach Israelite. So there's a certain, as though we've come all the way around the houses. We've gone to Ashkenazim, we've gone to Sephardim, and I think within the next next 100 years, we're going to see people coming together. I think that's the important thing. Not only will as the traditions mix, but the communities will mix, and we're going to get some more, not just a one-stop shop, but a commonality. And it's a commonality because we're here. And like you, Jonathan, I've learned so much from how everybody can be educated, that it's not, the halakha is open to all who want to learn it, whether especially the women, the men and the girls. And they've got lots, as we're noticing where we should, there are lots of rabbinate who've got something very important to say. And that's how things evolve. So they're evolving because we're here. And I think there's a new traditions coming because the Jews, within the next 50 years, the major percentage of Jews will be here, and that will cause a great revolution in itself.
Okay, I think it's a very important point that Brian raises there, but I just want to a slight word of caution on that, because I am a great fan of Nusach Israel. At least I was, but in recent years I have stepped back a little bit, and I'll tell you why. And that is because I'm scared that we are going to lose some of the beauty of the minhagim from the various different communities that we've got. It's a tension that we've got here. On the one hand, Brian, I 100% agree with you. Let's all be Israeli. Let's all be Jewish. Let's forget all those labels again that we had. Let's go back to the application form and scrub them all out and put Jewish. I'm with you on that. But there's such beauty that comes from these minhagim. it would be a great pity if we were to lose it. In the last couple of years, I don't know, it's because I'm getting older and I'm getting a bit nostalgic, but I've started, I'll let you into a little secret. On the odd occasion when I'm not allowed to go to shul because of an azakat or something, I have to daven at home. I've started to daven out of my old singer's prayer book, right? Because it gives me, I don't know, I like it. It gives me a warm feeling back to the minhagim of my childhood. Now, I ditched the singer's prayer book when I got married, and I left the United Synagogue type of shul, but I've gone back to it because I think we've got to also, whilst I agree with you, Brian, I do agree with you, but just a word of caution, let's try and preserve as well some of the beautiful minhagim of all our different places. I'm not going to have any more children. I very much doubt I'll have any more children. I may have some more grandchildren, Bezrat Hashem, but I'm not going to have any more children, I wouldn't have thought. But if I were to have another son, I think I'd do a Brit Yitzchak, just because I think it's a beautiful minhag. Why not? Anyway, that's I agree with you, but let's not lose the beauty of all the different minhagim that have developed over the last 2,000 years. Hazel, you're next.
I have two, if you don't mind. At the beginning, you said that you welcome everybody and everybody. Yes, I agree with you on that. But how do we accept those who become converted by reform or another branch? You accept them willingly as a Jew?
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely.
Because right. My other one is, had it not been for the war, this Shabbat we would have gone to Yerushalayim for a bat mitzvah, and my grandchildren there belong to an Orthodox synagogue. It's beautiful. They've got loads of children, etc., etc. The bat mitzvah girl will do some laning, and I will get shvi'i. I love it. And I look up to heaven and I say to my father, you see, we only had 4 girls in the family, but I know my brothers and I'm going to sing them. What's your opinion?
Okay, well, my opinion, the first thing is Mazal Tov and Kol HaKavod. There are issues. There's no question about that. However, if it is an Orthodox synagogue and they will no doubt have taken Orthodox advice, would I want to do it? I'm not sure I would. Do I accept that somebody else would want to do that? And do I accept that there are opinions that say so? Yes. Gesundheit, as they say. If I was the rabbi of the shul, would I allow it? Probably not at this stage, but who knows? I would allow a lot of stuff now that I wouldn't allow 30 years ago. I can tell you that. I didn't know any different. So Mazal Tov, enjoy. You should only have smachot. Philip, I think you wanted to say something. Philip Lehrer, you're muted, which is a joy.
Hazel actually asked. Hazel here actually asked about the question that I wanted to address is the fact that Haredim and Reform Jews have nothing in common except maybe for the fact that they're both not Zionistic. I mean, the Haredim are definitely not Zionistic, but I think the Reform Judaism is also not non-Zionistic. That's about the only thing that they have in common. Because
so what?
So I mean, so they're so far apart from each other that I'm not sure that they are the same religion.
Okay. Right, I'm not going to open that up for discussion. I'm going to answer that on everybody's behalf. A Reform Jew and a Haredi Jew are very much the same religion. A Reform Jew may not agree with a Haredi may not agree with a Reform Jew. Look at me, I'm right in the middle, right? And you've heard me say this many times before, Philip. Anybody frommer than me is a fanatic. Anybody less from than me is a shaigetz, right? And that's how we all believe, okay? I am where I am. I have very many things that I disagree with the Haredim on, many things that I agree with them on, and the same goes for the Reform. So to say that they are not the same religion, no, sorry, Philip, not accepting that at all.
Agreed.
Okay, one last question for somebody who has not yet asked. Anybody who wants to ask a question or make a comment? Last one. Going. Yes, Rachel.
Yeah, it's actually a comment, and it's a positive comment to show how we've blended in without even realizing it. The Rosh Hashanah customs, because when I was a kid, apple and honey, that's it. Now the Siddur itself, the art scroll, has got the whole list of things, which was Sephardi. They were never Ashkenazi, and now everybody does them. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. That's a very good example, Rachel, of how, and Ronnie said, Minhag Yisrael is great, but don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. And he's absolutely right. And what you've just said, Rachel, is not only not throwing the baby with the bathwater, it's actually making the bathwater more beautiful, making the baby more beautiful with the bathwater. So if we can do what Brian has said, which is to bring all these minhagim together, and it might end up all being a bit of a mishmash, and we might have to work very hard to know what came from where, kind of thing. But nevertheless, if we take the best bits of everything, then we are going to be in the greatest position. What we've got to avoid, and this was my raison d'etre for putting this shiur together, what we've got to avoid is the concept that sadly I was brought up with not knowingly, and that is that Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, is only one way and everything else is not acceptable, or is and that's just the way it was. Judaism is not one size fits all. Orthodox Judaism is not one size fits all. And one day, please God, in the future, I'll do a talk about the other denominations of Judaism. And then you can, those of you that want to stone me can do so thereafter. Is that Phyllis down there that wants to say something?
That is. I really just want to say thank you for such an affirming shiur. I'm in the States now, and I just constantly looking to connect to your thinking. As someone who comes from a very unaffiliated home, first marriage to an Orthodox Jew, my second marriage to someone who thought he was secular, but he's really very Masorti, and the acceptance and how we have to negotiate all of this in our family, and how hard we try to do this, making everyone feel accepted and loved, is quite a challenge. But your thinking is very affirming and very much how we try to approach our families. So I really want to say thank you.
Thank you for that. I will just finish on that point. Phyllis's point is a very important point, because many of us have children and grandchildren who are at different places on the religious spectrum.
Oh my God.
Many of us have families, children who are more religious than we are, more Haredi than we are. I'm not using the word religious, that's not the correct word. More Haredi than we are. And some of us have got children who are less observant than we are. But they're all our children. They're all our family. And you expand that, you might have a brother or a sister who is more Haredi, less Haredi, more secular, less secular, reform, God forbid, reform, right? They're still your brother, they're still your sister, right? And I finish with what I begin with. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew, and I love them all. Laila Tov, everybody.
Laila Tov. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Laila Tov, Chodesh Tov.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you very much for that. That was very
thank you
inspiring.
For very, very interesting. It's really good to hear. We're all Jews